this is the compound miter saw. A lot of people refer to this as a chop saw. You do not want to chop with this. You want to come down controlled, slowly, and pass through your material nice and slow and under control. Not only will it give you a more accurate cut, it won't tear the wood as much, giving you splinters on the edges. It's called a compound miter saw because you can change the miter angle by simply pressing down on this button here, and then you can lock it into abnormal angles by pressing down on this lever. If I pull this up and then put it on, it'll click into the most commonly used 22.5, 35.3, 31.6, 45, 0. It'll click into them and lock, and you can see those notches on the front here. So it'll lock into place, but you still want to press this down. That locks your angle. If I take and I move to 45 in this direction, and I loosen this wing nut in the back, this giant wing nut, if you zoom in, Chris, you can see that. Come on in here. This giant wing nut in the back, if I loosen it, I can move in another direction. That's why it's called a compound miter saw. Some miter saws only go in one direction. There's also a set screw on top here for the slide lock. So if I wanted to, I could cut a up to 15-inch piece of material by pulling it out, turning it on by pulling the trigger, introducing it slowly to my material, and then pushing it away from myself, right? And then that would cut all the way through my material. If I'm cutting something like a 2x4, where it's not 15 inches wide, I will take that screw, which is kind of hard to see, I'll take this screw, it says slide lock, and I'll tighten that down so that it doesn't slide. I can't pull this forward because I don't want to have it bind up accidentally. So that slide lock is locked if I'm just cutting a 2x4. I can also take, and there's a set screw behind here that I can loosen right here. And I can loosen that and I can move the fence. Now I want to move the fence if I'm doing an angle, right? Because I don't want to cut into that fence on the angle. But if I leave this right up here, and I cut in, I could cut into it. You can see some of them have been cut. So I can open and set, I can move the fence on these if I need to as well. When I pull this trigger, it's going to start the saw. When I let go of the trigger, it's going to stop. It has an E-brake. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So it reverses the polarity in the motor to slow the motor down. With some of these pieces of equipment, like the sander, it won't do that. It'll just keep spinning. It'll quietly spin. So you do want to check with the sander and a few other things, is it stopped? Never pull this guard out of the way to do anything. You want to keep your hands away from the material. If you need to, there are clamps that can clamp the material. So generally your fingers should not be any closer than 3 inches to the blade. Pretty much any blade in here. So if I want to make this cut, I'm going to hold my material here. I'm going to hold my hand, my thumb in, and press down and into the fence. With most of our equipment, we're going to press down and into the fence. I'm going to pull the trigger, slowly move through the material, let it go. The blade will stop, and I'll lift that saw back up. The chopping motion, I'm going to do the chopping motion so you can see how it tears the wood, and then I'm going to do a nice slow cut. It's hard on the machine if you chop with it. That's why we don't call it a chop saw, we call it a compound miter saw. you can see when I went slowly through the material, I got a nice, clean, crisp cut. When I did that chopping motion, I got a really crappy cut that's like fuzzy and there's splinters. Then you want to slowly pass through your material nice and slow, and then let go of the trigger, and then lift the material, then lift the blade out of the material. Does that make sense? Compound miter saw. All right, moving on.